And I said, honey, I wanted head on a ladder, not a head on a platter. And oh, hi there. Sorry about that. Didn't see you. Welcome back to another episode of Cold Blood and Cocktails. As you beautiful people know, any tiff you may have, please cast it away because this is a channel of positive energy. Okay? Thank you. Oh, my dirty little devils. How you doing today? I hope wherever you're at in the world, you're having a great day so far. I myself am doing wonderful. I have been working on this episode for probably like 4 months, and I've had it done for about 3.5 months. But she's kind of a longer one, and so I've kind of been putting it off. First time I've ever put off something long in my life. Hopefully you can hear me okay through this thing. I don't normally talk while I'm gagged. But today's story, I'm gonna tell you the fuck right now, it's probably the grossest case yet. Like, Catherine's nickname is the female Hannibal Lecter, and do you know what his character did? Well, one of his favorite dishes was human liver with fava beans and a nice Chianti, so there you go. Which, speaking of today's cocktail, it's not a cocktail, but a nice glass of Chianti. How fitting, right? Shit, how the fuck am I supposed to get this? I need a straw. Okay, let's try this. There we go. Ooh, interesting. Well, there you go. And on the episode where we probably have more suspicious shots than any other episode. Great. But anyways, ask any Australian that's into murder mystery who this psycho is, and they'll probably know her name. And who is that? Why, Miss Katherine Knight, Kathy the Speckled Hen, Kath the Wrath. Alright, folks, so let's take this all the way back to the early 2000s in the little tiny town of Aberdeen, Australia. A local phone call came into the police station from a mining company saying that a man named John Price hadn't shown up to work, which was very unusual. John's car was in his driveway. It seemed like someone was home, yet nobody was answering the door. Which literally sounds like me. I will watch you stand at my door through my little peephole, not answer, and then watch you walk away. Is that creepy? That's probably creepy. Anyways, Officer Scott and a fellow cop grab a quick coffee and scoot out to the house, but when they get there, they knock and still nobody answers. They try peeking inside the windows, but the blinds are drawn and the men can only see a sliver of the living room. To the officers, it almost looked like there was a curtain or something hanging between the living room and the kitchen doorway. Maybe these folks were doing a little home DIY HGTV renovation and this was just a hanging dust cloth. The cops decide that since they got the call and nobody was answering the door, their best bet would be to break in and make sure everything's okay, do a little wellness check. So down the door comes and everything seemed okay, so they just walked in. As they pass the curtain, one of the cops reaches out and pushes it aside, only to be rather taken aback because the curtain is quite chilly on his arm. He thought, what in the fresh hell is this material? And he looked down at his arm, realizing that his skin was now covered in blood. He's like, fuck a moose, did I cut myself breaking in? This is gonna be so much damn paperwork and not how I wanted to start my day. Oh, well, you just wait, mister. Because when they walked in a little bit further, they soon realized that this curtain wasn't a curtain, but was a human pelt. An entire person's flesh just hanging there like one of grandma's macrame planters. And right past the skin was the torso it belonged to without a head or naughty bits. Even though these small town cops had really never witnessed anything like this, they immediately knew what the fuck was happening and pulled out their little pistols. Pew pew. The cops were starting to notice the blood smears all over the wall, the little splatters on the ground, the handprints here and there. Clearly something horrific had happened and was probably still going on just a few feet away from them. Could you imagine how fucking scary that would be? Like, bitch, I could never. But oddly, they were a little bit comforted because it smelled like a 5-star Michelin rated restaurant in the house. They slowly creep forward towards the kitchen, which looks like a scene straight out of a horror movie, and notice a steaming pot on the stove. Scott's like, shit on a cracker, I'll take one guess as to where the skin guy's head is. And what was extra weird was that amidst the chaos of what appeared to be a gruesome ass murder scene, there were little pops of normal life. A warm cup of tea sitting next to the stove, piping hot plates of meat and vegetables that appeared to have been very nicely presented. These poor cops were scared shitless and just confused beyond belief. And scarier yet, is the person who did all this shit still in the house? Like, are they hiding, ready to strike? The cops stop and kind of focus on listening for a minute, and they can faintly hear snoring coming from a few rooms down. Well, someone didn't turn on their CPAP machine. How could anyone do that and then fall asleep? Like, that is suspicious. They follow the snores and find that there, apparently down for a little nippy nap, was a woman. The cops try and nudge her awake, but she wouldn't move, so they haul her tits up and drag her ass to the back lawn. For all they knew, she could have taken a handful of sleeping pills and was trying to kill herself. But who in the fuck was this woman? Why, 49-year-old Kathy Knight, aka John's girlfriend. And I know, who the hell is John? Well, they'd started their their relationship 5 years earlier in 1995. Both a bit rather unlucky with love, they decided to say, fuck it, and they were a match made in, honestly, hell. John had more breakups than a Hollywood celebrity, and he was a hard worker, but he kind of hit the liquor bottle like it was fucking Aquafina. He just loved the rough and gruff ambiance around the mines where he worked, and he didn't want much more in life other than his job and a gal to call his own. So when Kathy came around, she filled a void for John. Not necessarily a love void, but she was a semi-warm body to be around. We've all had one of those in our lives, haven't we? John enjoyed that she was just like his friends, swearing every other word, drinking like a fish, smoking like a bag of burnt popcorn, and could throw a party louder than Times Square at New Year's. But soon into the relationship, John realized that Lil Mama was strung tighter than a tire swing. Oh, she'd be very publicly jealous over John's past relationships, and they'd burst into a yelling match in the middle of one of the town's 2 bars. It was totally out of nowhere, too. She'd be fine, and then boom, suddenly she had an issue with a hookup John had had 15 years ago. And everything was about revenge with Kathy. Like one day, John had come home a little bit later than expected, and to get back at him, she took pictures of like a $20 first aid kit that she thought he'd stolen from work, and then she sent those pictures to his boss like, what a bitch. Which, as we know, John's work is kind of everything to him, and ending his livelihood like that over something stupid like what the actual fuck. But it wasn't just his source of income that he'd ended, she was mooching off of him, so her income was stopped as well. Which was the thing about Kathy, like she was always willing to hurt herself if it meant hurting someone else even more. All of John's friends were like, this lady is a jealous, skeezy skank. Kick her ass to the curb, look what she's done to you. Because it turned out that the first aid kit he'd taken from work was expired and was gonna be pitched. So he's like, no, don't toss it, I'll take it. The co-workers knew this, his friends knew this, yet now he was out of a job and Kathy had gotten her way. He did have a moment of clarity and finally kicked her ass out, but after 3 months, she showed up on his doorstep in a lace teddy and a trench coat, and he could not say no to that. Man, am I right? At this point, he was just throwing fucking everything away. He'd lost his job, he'd lost the respect of any of his friends for taking Kathy back, so it was either have Kathy and no friends, or friends and no Kathy. To literally everyone else, that choice was clear, but for John, he had different ideas. But I do want to say, if you've ever been in an abusive relationship, the way that John was thinking is kind of sadly understandable. Abusers fuck with your head, man. So John lived this life of total seclusion with just Kathy, which is exactly how she wanted it. And even though Kathy swore up and down that, oh, this time it'll be different, this time she'll be kind and understanding and control her jealousy, that shit lasted like a week until she was back to her original bitch-assery. She'd physically abuse the shit out of him and take mental blows like this lady was a pro manipulator. And every time something abusive would happen to John, he'd ring up an old friend and reiterate exactly what was going on, saying, if I go missing, point the finger at this stupid hoe that I can't seem to escape, okay? You a stupid hoe, you a stupid. And one night after a particularly rough battle, John had finally had enough. He stormed out into the living room, muted the TV, threw his hands up and said, bitch, screw you, I want your ass out. Good for him, right? But of course her ass just looked at him, laughed in his face, and went back to eating Cheetos and watching Family Feud. So he called the cops, and when they got there, they said, oh, we can't kick her out, you need a court order to do that. And John's like, what in the holy hell are you talking about? She doesn't legally even live here. She's not on the deed. She hasn't signed anything. She's a fucking abuser. Which I know sounds so fucking ridiculous, and I'm sure you're like, that can't be true. But I actually know someone very close to me whose abuser would not fucking leave the house even when the cops were called. And that wasn't in Australia. That was in America. Sometimes it is so fucking weird because a lot of times the abuser wins. Like, that is not right. When the cops left, it started to dawn on John that he'd gotten himself into a giant elephant-sized pile of shit, and the only way out was probably gonna be death, either his or hers. And he's probably thinking, shit, if death is the only way out, am I gonna have to go to prison for this lady? 12 hours into John's realization, he woke up to Kathy standing over him with her hands behind her back. It's like Kathy Bates in Misery. Whew. Obviously, John freaked out because she probably had a knife or an axe or a gun. He got away from her, ran to a neighbor's house, and once again called the police. Turns out she wasn't holding a damn thing, but he could not shake this feeling of fright, and he just wanted her out of his damn house. And honey, brace your titties, because it gets worse. When the cops do finally show up, Kathy runs up to them and says that John was the one abusing her. The nerve, the gall, the gumption, the brazen brass balls that she has. They were brought to a judge who was like, look, you fools, the two of you are grown-ass adults, stop acting like ninnies, and stay the fuck away from each other. And this led to restraining orders against each other, but even John knew that these were just pieces of paper. Like, is that gonna fucking stop Kathy? Probably not. Poor John heads to work on Monday as pale as a ghost and was telling everyone there that he just knew Kathy had some nasty tricks up her sleeve. But while he was saying this, he himself chose to remain in contact with Kathy, so like, choices. Later after work, John heads over to his friend's house and is like, in the morning, if my truck is still in the driveway, call the cops because Kathy has killed me. Suspicious anyone? Nah. And what the hell do you know? When John didn't show up to work the next day, his friends immediately knew the worst had finally come. I say finally because everyone, including John, knew it was bound to happen. Cops showed up, found the house full of body parts and Kathy unconscious on the bed from too many sleeping pills. The cops immediately assumed it was Kathy, and fortunately it looked like she was going to be out cold for a while from all the pills, and it kind of gave investigators a chance to snippety snoop around the house and do some digging. The cops called for backup because it didn't really take a genius to figure out that this was a murder, and whoever answered the call was like, "But can you be sure that it's a murder?" And the cop says, "Well, there's a head cooking in a pot on the stove, a skinned body on the rug in the hall, and a human curtain of flesh just hanging in the doorway, so I don't think this happened by accident." So the investigators haul ass out to John's house expecting a gruesome scene, but they're met with what smells like Thanksgiving dinner. They were just so confused, but just like the cops before, soon realized what it was that smelled so good, and they kind of freaked out. I mean, I would too, but also I'm kind of curious, like, what did it smell like? And now with more pairs of eyes, they were able to see exactly what had happened. It seemed as though John had just been stabbed in his sleep. He'd woken up, ran for the bedroom door, and left a bloody fingerprint on the light switch heading out. And then as the blood smears get closer to the exit of the home, they start getting lower to the ground, ending in the foyer, where he had managed to open the door but ended up bleeding out before he could get away. It's so sad because he was so close. Oh, yet so damn far. And all of these cops and investigators knew John. This was a tiny little town where everyone knew everyone, so this shit was extra personal. When coroners take what's left of the body, they see that John actually hadn't been stabbed once, he'd been stabbed 37 times. So the fact that he'd even been able to get that close to the door after all that shit was just shocking. And if the kitchen crime scene alone wasn't enough to make any of the investigators want to retire, they could actually see the outline of where John's body had been. It was just imprinted in the carpet and you could see exactly where the head used to be but was no longer there. And they could tell that the skin had been very cleanly removed and just set on the carpet to drain out. Right after that, I guess she took his head off and you can see exactly where she walked into the kitchen because the drip marks led right up to the kitchen pot on the stove. Next to the stove, there were plates of vegetables with meat and a roast in the oven. Except this wasn't a roast, it was John's ass that had been cut into 5 different steaks, 2 of them on each plate, and the 5th one was in the dog's stomach. And the plates looked gorgeous too, like straight out of a Pottery Barn ad ready to be presented at a dinner party. This was the weirdest shit ever. In fact, just above the plates were 2 little name cards, both of which were John's relatives. Katherine eventually wakes up and is like, "I didn't do shit, I don't remember doing that, it couldn't have been me." She says this, literally wearing an apron covered in blood. Like, okay, Kathy. But after a few hours of being interrogated, she magically remembers what she'd done and was like, "Oh, wait, no, I do remember, it was me, yes, but I did it in self-defense, I swear. John had been abusing me for months, and even when the cops were called, nobody helped me. I literally had no other choice." Well, Kath happened to have a reputation around town. Cops knew about hers and John's relationship and knew damn well that Kathy was the abuser. So the fact that she was now saying she was abused was very just not believable. And what was extra suspicious was the fact that just the night before, Kathy had set up a camera at her daughter's house and began telling everyone what of hers they'd get like it was her last will and testament. And then less than 24 hours after making the video, she'd hook up with John one last time, go for a pee, and then kill him. And right after she stabbed and dismembered him, she hopped in the shower, drove around, went to an ATM, had a merry old time, did some burnouts in a parking lot, and came home to cook dinner. Or cook him for dinner. Ugh. But no, Kathy did this all in self-defense. With an eye roll the size of Tacoma, Washington, the investigators start looking into Kathy's old flings. She'd been in 3 big relationships in her life, and it seemed like they were all with big, large, burly men. She had a type, Kathy did. And normally you'd see these men and think there is no way Kathy could ever inflict any kind of abuse on them. They'd easily overpower her. No, madam. Every single one of them said they cowered under her. She was small but mighty and mighty evil at that. I mean, this lady's hoo-ha must have had the power of 15 virgin goddesses or something because I don't get it otherwise. Every single ex said how psycho she was, yet most of them came back at least once. But love does do crazy shit on you, right? Or crazy people do crazy shit to you. But to understand all of Kathy's craziness, investigators had to really dive dick deep into her past. It seemed, of course, that she'd been born into a very dysfunctional family, or at least more dysfunctional than the average family. I mean, we all have a few crazy loons sprinkled in there. But Kathy's mom had 4 kids before she got bored and started lifting her legs for her husband's work friends. And people around town found out and kind of shunned Barbie, so she ended up moving out of town without her children. Mother of the year. She then met a new guy who she had 4 more babies with, one of whom was Kathy. Sadly though, this new guy was a raging alcoholic and would sexually abuse Barbara up to 10 times a day. And then right after this shit would happen, she'd go straight to her kids and tell them every disturbing detail and let them know that not only do men suck, but sex is is bad. Yet when young Katherine approached her mom and said that some dude wants me to do some sexy acts on him that I don't want to do, Barbie basically said shut the fuck up and do it. And so when family members began assaulting Katherine, she did what her mom said. She shut up and did it. How fucking sad, right? This shit always stems from the childhood, like goddamn. As one could imagine, all of this made Katherine just very cold and abrasive. Time moved on, and even in her high school years, she was attacking teachers, and one of them actually had to injure Kath in self-defense. This story's actually giving me serious Mary Bell vibes. Do you remember her a few cases back? Anyways, eventually she found herself quite attracted to a coworker named David. David too had seen some shit in life, so they kind of bonded over that, but unfortunately, just like Kathy's good old daddy-o, he turned to heavy drinking too. Usually when he'd drink, he'd fight other people, and good old Bessie Kath was always there to back him up and swing a few punches. He liked that she was rough, gruff, and tough with a bangin' muff, and he really liked that she'd put a cigarette out on her tongue like, oh. However, this novelty did kind of lose its pizzazz pretty quickly, and even when David met Kath's mom Barbara, she warned him that Kathy is crazy, like she has some loose screws and is very capable of killing. I'm sorry, but if my partner's mom told me that, you can bet your ass I'd hightail it out of there. And then she went on to say that Kathy will get sick of you, she'll cheat on you, she'll toss you to the side and play the victim all while doing it. Sound familiar? David was like, bullshit, Barbie. Oh, his ass ended up popping a ring on Kath's finger, but not even 24 hours after the nuptials, he had a taste of exactly what Barbie had been going on about. Apparently, Barbara had told Kath that on her wedding night to her father, they'd spooned and forked 6 times. Damn! Hope they were drinking electrolytes. So when David had only been able to last 3 times before falling asleep, she tried to strangle him to death. And then just a couple months later, when David arrived home late from a dartboard competition, Kath's pregnant ass burned every piece of David's clothing from undies to his ties. And when he walked in the door, the bitch smacked him in the head with a fucking frying pan and caved in his skull. Of course, the police were called, but Kath and her magical kitty got David to drop all the charges. A few months later, when their first child was born, David finally said, screw you, I'm out of here, and left Katherine for another woman. Then people saw Kathy walking down Main Street, throwing her pram side to side with the baby rolling around like a jelly bean in a Dixie cup. She was carted off to the mental hospital for a few weeks, and almost immediately when she got out, she grabbed her baby and put it on the train tracks. Then she skipped around town with an axe and threatened to kill people. Fortunately, just before the train came by, a dude named Old Ted grabbed the baby, and Kath was carted once again off to the mental hospital. The next day, for some reason, the hospital let Kathy out, which, like, what was the point in even taking her in the first place then? Especially because a couple days after that, Kath randomly slashed a woman's face and took her hostage, telling her to drive in hopes of finding David. And this lady just happened to escape only because they were stopped at a gas station and she was able to call the cops, but by the time the police got there, Kath had taken yet another person hostage, saying she was gonna fillet them like a fish. The cops ended up finding a bunch of brooms and just started whacking the shit out of her with them until they could cuff her. She then admitted that she'd actually gone to the gas station to kill the mechanic who'd fixed David's car, which then allowed him to leave her. Makes sense. Police are like, holy shit, no wonder the dude left, like what a fucking nightmare. The police let David know of the incident, but rather than running the opposite way, he runs back straight into Kath's arms because, once again, Kath's vagine is like a fucking black hole. As one could imagine though, shit soon hit the windmill again and the relationship failed. Shocker. No worries though, because soon she met another man named David. She really liked her Davids. And ooh, honey, things with new David were going fast. He shacked up with her after just a few months, but he also kept his old apartment, and you know what that means. Actually, I don't know that it really meant anything, but to Kath it did. She became soup's jelly of whatever she thought he was doing and would randomly accuse him of cheating. She even knocked his ass unconscious with a frying pan several times too. My goodness, this woman needs new material. And to add just a touch more crazy to the psycho shit stew, she killed David's 2-month-old puppy right in front of him, saying that this would be him if he ever cheated. What the fuck? Like, run, dude. But you know how she do with that freaky fanny. She got knocked up with his kids and just like she wanted, prompted new David to buy them all a house. And the moment Kathy got her grubby little hands on this place, she decorated every square inch with animal pelts, with skulls from around the world, with sharp and rusty animal traps, knives, killing tools, just every inch covered in death, which made fighting even more dangerous. Because one night, yet again, she smacked his face with a frying pan and then stabbed him in the stomach with a pair of rusty scissors just hanging on the wall. He was like, fuck this, I'm deucing, and he moved away to a brand new city, he got a new name, and basically went into like a self-made witness protection program. And what did this lady do? She told everyone that he was the one to attack her, which everyone knew was a lie. A few years later, she had another baby with another guy. I think her baby toll was up to what, like 15 now? No, not really, but kind of. This dude put up with her for 3 years before it all went to shit. Really, nobody around town liked her. She was rude, she was mean, she was abusive, just all around trash who wasn't afraid to throw fists just for for the hell of it. At that point in her life, she'd had a job at a meat factory for over a decade. She'd worked her way up from cleaning up after the butchers to processing the meat and learning how to cut the perfect steak. And it was more than just a fascination, like she loved being surrounded by dead animals. Serious serial killer vibes. So when she would finally get to skin a human, for her it was just as natural as peeling a sweet potato. Anyways, this new guy she was with, he had a reputation for being a stand-up guy. He had a 2-year-old with his ex-wife, and his 2 other kids lived at home with him. He did know about Kath's violent tendencies, but when they were together, baby, it was like honey and cream, the banana to the daiquiri. And who was this man? Why, a Mr. John Price. Fast forward a few years and a few hundred fights later, and here the cops were with a murder on their hands. And with Kath's past, literally everything pointed towards her. Even Katherine's own family had told the police that she'd mentioned killing John for weeks, but they really hadn't thought much of it because she'd always seemed a bit mad. Looking back, they now realized she was just workshopping his murder and deciding which direction to go based off the family's reactions. A year goes by after the murder, and Katherine's trial finally comes around. Even though she admitted to killing John, she pleads not guilty. Of fucking course. But as the trial begins, she suddenly decides to change her plea, and now she's guilty. Well, by saying she was guilty and then getting sentenced, she'd be able to appeal and saying she was insane at the time of the trial. But before the trial, a psychologist analyzed her and said she wasn't insane, she was just a total bitch and might suffer from borderline personality disorder. So her plan kind of backfired and she ended up looking crazy but not insane. The courtroom was just like, shut the hell up, lady, when she started saying that, she was being abused and she was so unstable and blah blah blah. And after what seemed like hours of nonsense, she was finally given her sentence. She'd been branded a danger to the community and would probably murder anyone in her path without remorse. Therefore, Katherine was Australia's first ever woman to be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and that is where she remains today. What a fucking crazy one, right? Oh my god, I gotta go meditate after this. Anyways, my loves, there you go. Thank you for sitting through this with me. I love having you. And you know what? If you want a little bit more me in your life, head over to my Patreon. It's patreon.com/PopLuxe. You get videos a day early, you get Patreon-only content, and best part, it's cheap, fun, and fancy, just like me. Don't forget, my newest Repop collection is available at repopcosmetics.com. Comment down below, let me know what you thought of this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can follow me on Snapchat, Instagram, and Twitter at officialnady, and you can follow me online at thepopluxe.com. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all, and I will see you again soon. Bye!